right, what's going on, everyone? Casey Adams here. Welcome back to the Rise of the Young podcast. Today we have Tyler Winklevoss on the show, the co-founder of Gemini. Thanks so much for coming on, Tyler.
Thanks for having me, Casey.
I wanted to ask you, how is 2020 different than what Bitcoin was in 2017 with it being, crossing the all-time high mark?
Yeah, so it's very different. So much has happened in 3 years. Gemini is an exchange custodian that we built. We launched in 2015. It helps you buy, sell, and store cryptos like Bitcoin.
Yep.
Just from that vantage point, our company has grown so much. We're almost 330 employees.
Wow.
But there's been so many efforts in the space. But this bull run is being led very differently. There's some really legendary investors. For those of you who don't know, Google guys like Paul Tudor Jones, Stan Druckenmiller, these are hedge fund legends. They're taking positions in Bitcoin. They're talking about it. They're going on CNBC. We have publicly traded companies that are putting some of their treasury reserves, their cash on their balance sheet into Bitcoin because they're worried about the oncoming inflation for cash. So public companies like MicroStrategy, Jack Dorsey's Square, have taken huge positions of Bitcoin. So it's really being led quietly in a way by the most sophisticated investors in the room and really sophisticated publicly traded companies. So it's not the FOMO crowd. It's not the retail crowd. They're still there, but the hype, the overhype of 2017 doesn't feel like it's there. And what these people are seeing and believing, and I've spoken to many of them, is that Bitcoin is gold 2.0, right?
Yep.
And so it is your protection from inflation. And inflation's happening much because of all the stimulus spending, all the money printing that the US government, other governments around the world have resorted to help get economies out of the lockdown, the pandemic, but really the lockdown and the economic demand shock that's happened. So nobody's buying stuff, nobody's spending, you can't go to a restaurant. So governments are central banks are trying to pump money into the system to keep it afloat, to plug this hole. But what happens is that the dollar supply keeps increasing, the euros, the pounds, whatever. So your dollar used to be a certain percentage of all the dollars in circulation. And now that percentage is a lot lower. And so prices are going up. That's the result of inflation. When you print more money at a faster rate than the economy grows, which means all of your dollars can purchase less.
Yep.
So when you put your values in a dollar, it is actually degrading over time. It's sort of, I think I said this on another podcast, Bryce's podcast, if you have 10 apples and there's 100 apples in total, you've got 10% of the apple supply.
Yep.
All of a sudden you double that to 200 apples, you have 5% of the apples. So it's just less rare. And so the dollar is becoming, I sort of joke, but it's sort of turning into toilet paper.
Yeah.
It's going to depreciate, right? But so what people realize is to protect from that depreciation, they put their value into hard money assets with much tighter money supplies like gold. But gold is actually scarce. The supply is unknown, and people find ways to mine more, over time. Whereas Bitcoin supply is fixed at 21 million. And that is a really important characteristic because we know how the supply of Bitcoin's fixed. There's no technological breakthrough that can increase that. So when you buy a Bitcoin, and you can buy $100 of Bitcoin, you can buy any fraction, it's always the same percentage of the entire pie. And in the backdrop of the pandemic, the lockdown, the money printing, there's a term in economics called helicopter money. Everyone in the US got a $1,200 check that just literally came out of thin air. The way to, and people are like scratching that, like people are starting to get it, how is it happening? It's actually like the Federal Reserve, waves a magic wand and it happens, and people are sort of saying that feels a little bit like not real because it's not, and that I think that's why Bitcoin, it's been a catalyst driver for Bitcoin lately.
Totally.